Have you ever had that strange feeling deep inside that something was terribly wrong, but you convinced yourself it was fine? How many times have you excused someone's behavior just because you cared for them? What if I told you that much of your emotional pain doesn't come from what others have done to you, but from what you've allowed yourself to keep enduring? Not because you're weak, but because somewhere along the way, you were taught to call dysfunction love. This isn't a story about blame, it's about clarity. Carl Jung didn't write to comfort, he wrote to awaken. And today, on Beyond the Twist, we're diving into reflections inspired by Jung's most powerful psychological truths. These aren't random opinions. They're insights carved from the depths of the human soul. Jung believed that what we do not make conscious will rule our lives, and we will call it fate. In other words, if you never bring awareness to what you've been tolerating in your relationships, you'll keep living the same patterns again and again. In this video, we'll uncover 10 specific behaviors that, according to Jung's deep understanding of the human psyche, you should never tolerate. This isn't just a list, it's a mirror. And maybe, just maybe, it's the awakening you didn't realize you needed. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to Beyond the Twist for more reflections that nurture your emotional and spiritual growth. Now let's begin. 1. Emotional manipulation disguised as love. When someone constantly makes you feel guilty for expressing your needs or setting boundaries, that's not love, that's control. Jung believed that when the truth of the soul is denied, it begins to fall ill. That illness begins the moment you start sacrificing your identity just to keep a connection alive. Over time, emotional manipulation slowly destroys your self-trust. You start to believe your boundaries are problems rather than protections. The longer you accept it, the further you drift from your emotional truth and from the courage to stand up for it. Manipulation often imitates care, but in reality, it conditions you to associate love with discomfort. 2. Contempt hidden as honesty. I'm just being honest. You've heard that line before, right? Often, it's the favorite phrase of someone delivering cruelty wrapped in truth. Real honesty carries compassion, not sharpness. Jung reminded us that the human spirit needs affirmation, not erosion. Contempt disguised as truth isn't sincerity, it's domination. You don't grow through cruelty, you shrink. This kind of communication slowly chips away at your confidence, making you question your worth before you even realize it's happening. It replaces connection with correction and leaves you feeling smaller every time. 3. Control disguised as protection. When someone restricts your freedom in the name of caring, it's often their own inner chaos trying to control you. Jung described this as the shadow's way of asserting power. Real love doesn't confine you, it expands you. Control that's disguised as care often stems from fear, not love. It's driven by insecurity, not protection. What might appear as concern can actually be a subtle way to shrink your world and silence your individuality. The cost is your autonomy, and over time, you forget the version of yourself that once felt free. 4. Gaslighting, the destruction of your inner compass. Gaslighting is not confusion. It's psychological warfare. It's when someone invalidates your experiences until you begin to doubt your own sanity. Jung once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead to an understanding of ourselves." But when your emotional compass is constantly hijacked by someone else's reality, you're not growing. You're being controlled. Long-term gaslighting rewires your sense of truth until you no longer trust your own memory, your emotions, or even your instincts. It keeps you trapped in a fog where your abuser becomes the source of your reality. It dismantles your confidence, one perception at a time. 5. Dismissing your inner world. You share a dream, a passion, a little piece of your heart, and they mock it. They laugh, they belittle it, or they simply ignore it. Jung emphasized that the authentic self must be integrated, not denied. If your creativity, joy, or purpose is constantly dismissed, you're not in a partnership. You're in emotional suffocation. The soul cannot thrive in a space where your inner world is treated as meaningless. This dismissal forces you to silence yourself just to avoid ridicule or rejection. Your dreams don't disappear. They retreat, hiding behind shame. 6. Lack of empathy. Empathy is the bridge that allows two souls to meet. Jung understood that without empathy, no real intimacy can exist. If someone constantly invalidates your emotions, overlooks your pain, or treats your needs as inconveniences, that's not love, that's depletion. Lack of empathy makes you shrink your emotional reality just to preserve the illusion of closeness. You begin to forget that your feelings even matter. A connection without empathy isn't a relationship, it's a monologue. 7. Repeated betrayal followed by empty apologies. When apologies turn into a cycle, a loop of sorry without change, you're not being respected. You're being managed. Jung observed that repeated behavior is never accidental. When someone keeps hurting you in the same way, it's not a mistake. It's a choice. A relationship built on apologies instead of accountability becomes a trap. Each repetition dulls your sense of trust, not just in others, but in yourself. Eventually, you start confusing endurance with love. 8. Selfishness disguised as independence. It's beautiful to be self-sufficient, but when autonomy becomes a shield to avoid emotional responsibility, it's not independence, it's detachment. If you're always the one initiating, reaching out, or maintaining the connection, it's not mutual. It's one-sided devotion. Jung would call this an imbalance of psychic energy, where one gives endlessly and the other only receives. True independence values connection. False independence avoids it. These relationships make you believe you're asking for too much when, in truth, you're asking for the bare minimum. Before we move on, if these reflections are helping you see yourself more clearly, consider sharing this video with someone who needs it. And if you want to support Beyond the Twist in creating more meaningful, soul-centered content, you can use the Thanks button below. Your support truly helps us grow and continue this work. Now, let's continue. 9. Sarcasm as a weapon. Passive-aggressive humor might look harmless, but it's often a mask for hostility. Jung taught that what remains unspoken gets projected, and sarcasm is often just resentment in disguise. When jokes start feeling like jabs, you're not being laughed with, you're being laughed at. Sarcasm normalizes disrespect and trains you to accept pain wrapped in humor. You start doubting your own reactions, telling yourself you're too sensitive. Over time, your sense of emotional safety fades, and with it, your self-respect. 10. Emotional withdrawal as punishment. Withholding affection, ignoring messages, or going silent to gain control, that's not maturity. Jung saw this as the shadow's retreat, a regression into unconscious behavior. When someone withdraws instead of discussing, isolates instead of communicating, they're not protecting peace, they're punishing with silence. This emotional distance creates confusion where there should be comfort, fear where there should be safety. The silent treatment becomes a form of power, a quiet punishment that fractures your sense of worth. The more you chase connection, the more invisible you feel. And invisibility is a kind of emotional exile. Jung never taught us to judge others. He taught us to recognize ourselves. And seeing what you've been tolerating isn't bitterness. It's liberation. These 10 behaviors might feel familiar, maybe even normal. But normal isn't the same as healthy. Every time you excuse what hurts you, you're teaching your soul to settle. But your soul wasn't made to settle. It was made to breathe. Healing begins with truth, with calling things by their real names. Saying to yourself, this is not love. This is manipulation. This is not honesty. This is humiliation. This is not passion. This is chaos. And above all, this is not mine to carry anymore. You are not overreacting. You are awakening. And that awakening is the start of everything. If this message touched you, take a moment to share your thoughts in the comments. Write your truth, or simply say, I choose clarity over chaos. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to Beyond the Twist, your space for deep reflection, healing, and emotional renewal. You deserve a community that honors your growth.